What inspired me really was that I had this massive interest in technology, which I've always had since I was like 6 years old, really, and used to build websites just when the World Wide Web was kind of emerging and stuff. So always had a big interest in technology, but nonetheless found myself practicing as a lawyer. Decided ultimately not to pursue the technology route, at least in the first stage of my career. So I ended up at Freshfields as a lawyer, but that interest in technology never went. And it kind of worlds collided very well because as I was a lawyer interested in technology, spending a lot of my time doing very manual processes like preparing court bundles and checking them a million times and proofreading documents in the middle of the night, I just thought there's got to be some things that technology can help with here. So really the thing that inspired me and continues to inspire me really is that lawyers are really smart people, they're really clever people, and they're doing a lot of things that they needn't do, frankly. And well, I'm sure we'll get on sort of talking about things like the ROI of technology in law firms and things like that. It's really that human side that keeps me interested. Thing that motivates me is helping people working in an environment like I used to work smarter and enjoy their lives a bit more. So that's what inspired me. Well, when I think of any kind of any project you're doing in any business, really, it's got to have something that I call a business outcome at the end of it. Like, so it's got to deliver something of value at the end of the chain, and that usually in most businesses is something like profitability. So how can we make this business more profitable? How can we make it more money? It could also be things like if the company has as an ultimate value like employee well-being and diversity and things like that, retaining employees, all that kind of thing. Those can be ultimate outcomes as well. But the thing with efficiency is that efficiency is never an ultimate outcome. You should never ever deliver efficiency just for the sake of efficiency. And the reason for that is that, as you say, in law firms, it doesn't really translate very well into anything unless you try hard. Like, so efficiency in the context of a law firm makes money by billing time to clients. What's the point in being efficient? And lots of people will kind of hear that and they'll say, "Oh, that you must be mad. Why are you saying efficiency is pointless?" And that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you have to look for the thing that efficiency delivers for you. So a classic example might be, I've already talked about court bundling processes. That's a classic thing that clients don't want to pay law firms to do, but law firms have to do. And so when the law firm presents the bill with 20,000 spent on a court bundle, the client will always challenge that. They'll always try and get that figure down to 10,000 or something. So if you're going to lose 10,000 on that, if you're billing 20,000, you need to get your costs down. So in that scenario, you can see where efficiency really does translate into something like profitability, where you're just doing efficiency because you feel like it's the right thing to do. You've got to look at things like, do the clients actually care about efficiency in that area? And it's a really hard one for me because while I really want people to be working as efficiently as they possibly can, I think right now that the nature of law firm culture is that you have to find a way for efficiency to deliver something. It's got to be something like profitability or diversity or retaining employees. And when you look at efficiency through that lens, it means that you're not just going for efficiency across the board, but you're looking for the specific areas in which efficiency might deliver something of higher value to you.
Let's say, I think by design, lawyers are trained to give answers, potentially not much to ask the right questions. Instead, at least my assumption, I'm happy to be challenged, instead, with the design thinking way, or with the importance of understanding the tech that you use or you would like to use, step number one is asking the right questions. So can you please tell us what has been your experience recently in shaping the way you have asked questions to clients, and what made you, let's say, mature your own way and elaborate your way of asking better questions rather than jumping to answers?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And for me, I've been on a bit of a journey here because when I was, like you say, when you're training to be a lawyer, you're not really you're really taught how to do this properly. At least I wasn't. And indeed, in legal practice, you're kind of not encouraged to, because I think one character trait that a lot of lawyers have is that they don't want to be seen as somebody that doesn't already know everything. They don't want to expose any gaps in their knowledge. So if you start asking like relatively open questions to your clients when you're advising on a legal matter, it's not something that people like doing. And I'd also argue that the nature of the work that lawyers do is kind of a bit different in nature to like designing an app or something. It's a bit more closed than, whereas if you're designing an app, you could literally do anything. So you need to ask some open questions to confine what you're about to do. Whereas in my former practice, which was helping companies in financial difficulty, there's kind of only a limited menu of things that you can actually do. And then the things you can do there are pretty prescribed by law anyway. So the nature of the types of questions you ask as a lawyer are quite fundamentally different. But transitioning into the more sort of legal technology side of things, I sort of brought that thinking with me when I was working on software. Didn't ask very open questions at the start, and what it meant was that in order to confine scope on the project and make decisions, I was kind of following my own instincts on what to do. And it meant that I designed a piece of software that was amazing if every single person in the world was a carbon copy of me. But unfortunately, that is not the case. So I learned pretty quickly that you have to ask a variety of people a lot of relatively open questions to understand whether this thing, for example, would even be helpful to them. Because something that I care about, like, I've referenced court bundling already, that was a horrible task for me. Other people might not care about that so much. So you need to validate. That's the kind of question you need to ask, kind of validate whether people care about the problems or not. And so I realised you needed to ask these questions, and you need to get to the core of these things. Like I've already referenced business outcomes. So like, what are the business outcomes of this project? Other things like when you're designing a tool, you need to understand what problems you're solving. And so I immediately then said to users and people like that, I asked them those questions. What are your business outcomes? What problems are you solving? And usually these people are lawyers and they're not used to having that kind of question asked to them. And so two things happened when I asked those questions to them. Number one, they kind of just confused and didn't really understand. And number two, they left the meeting pretty quickly because they thought that I was just one of those business IT jargon people. So now I still want to know the answer to these questions, but I don't ask the questions directly. I ask questions that they do feel comfortable answering that will give me the data in order to answer the questions. So instead of sort of asking people what problems are you trying to solve, I would ask a slightly different question, which is, tell me what you did yesterday at work. And then they tell me what they did, and I say, okay, which of those, rate all of those 5 things you told me you did out of 10, each of them. And then the one that they rate the lowest, I kind of dig into that. And that's how I'm answering the question, what problems are you trying to solve? By asking them about, kind of like reversing the question, basically. So that's definitely a skill that I'm pretty much a beginner at, but I think it's pretty important because you need to answer these questions, but you also need to ask the question. Certainly the stuff that we were doing involved two things. First of all, like the law, and then secondly, how you actually do your service and advise people. And that latter thing there can be quite complicated. Like, for example, we were doing a big investigation when I was training, and we were looking through all of these documents, and we faced these there were like kind of 25 people that were relevant in this investigation whose emails we were reading and that kind of thing. And we were highlighting relevant documents and things like that, and we had to produce like packages of documents that would somehow show that who they were related to, and then it would be labeled with different themes and things like that. So we had to develop a system that presented our advice to the client in a way that was user friendly, basically. And we had to work as efficiently as we could because the timeframes were so demanding, which, by the way, is another good thing that efficiency delivers you. If you're under really, really intense time pressure and you can't meet your deadlines, that's really important as well. But what I'm saying is that sometimes I don't think that lawyers reflect enough on how they work. And I think I don't say that to blame anyone, because these guys are under just enormous pressure and they don't have time sometimes to sit back and say, hang on, we've done this before, but could we do it better the next time? Certainly my experience, the people tend to just there's this kind of phenomenon I've observed with people in any kind of project scenario, where imagine if you're doing like a building, people by their nature just want to get the spade out and start digging. They just want to get started. And sometimes people forget that planning stage, like of how are we going to start building? Where should we dig first? And people also forget that is actually part of the work. Like they feel like they're not working until they get the spade out and they start digging. Yes. So I think even acknowledging that fact is a really good thing for lawyers to do. In terms of how they can build that skill set, I think if they work with more people who do this stuff day in day out, like software professionals and people in their technology teams at their law firms, if they're encouraged by the nature of their training or their law firms to read a bit more widely and look into all these kind of methodologies like the lean startup and jobs to be done framework and stuff like that, I think it gives them a few skills just to kind of inform those planning conversations. And I think for law firms that might be an interesting way to involve the client as well. This is all like super, wishy-washy stuff. Lawyers very rarely do this right now, but maybe they will in the future. Who knows? There's a lot of AI initiatives that iManage is doing that I'm pretty actively involved in, but the answer I'm going to pick to respond to your questions slightly different, which is something I think that a lot of people assume law firms have been doing and legal teams have been doing for decades already. And what I'm talking about is knowledge management. And specifically, it feels to me like, having been in this knowledge management space for a few years now, people have been waiting for this magic thing to come along that will scan their entire DMS without any effort from humans and suddenly create them a magic knowledge base that's like the Google. Everyone says they want this Google thing, and they're waiting for this tool to scan their database, extract all the good contracts, exclude all the bad ones, develop guides for how people work, all this kind of stuff. And it feels to me like a lot of people have sort of given up waiting for that now. And they now realise that in order to deliver that experience, there is actually a little bit of work required that isn't as simple as just hitting a switch on a piece of technology. So what I'm working with people on doing is coming up with methodologies and processes through which they can capture knowledge from lawyers and other people, and through which they can store that content, categorize it properly, and maintain it over time. And one of the things that I work with customers on that seems to be a bit of a black hole, lots of people talk about it. In my experience, not a lot of people actually do it. I like to think that I actually do it, is this whole question of taxonomies and metadata and all this kind of stuff. And there's loads of stuff flying around here that makes it needlessly complicated. But the work I'm doing at the moment is trying to help law firms do that in a way that is as standard as it can be across different law firms, so they can benefit from kind of like productized features in products, but also sufficiently flexible to cater for their own specific needs. So I'm doing a lot of work with firms around that kind of stuff, and I think a lot of this is also driven by the desire of firms to use generative AI and other AI tools to extract insights from their own data, which I think a lot of people are beginning to realize is only really possible if you've done all of that work I was talking about. So that's the stuff that I'm most excited by, and I'm most excited by the thing it delivers now, and also the thing it could deliver in the future when generative AI has kind of evolved a little bit more and can start to draw some interesting conclusions from these kinds of data sets.